In this video, I will be explaining the lore and full story of all 76 multiplayer characters that are found in the Assassin's Creed series. I have made some edits on the original videos to make the video flow better, and also I should mention I may sound different in the intro section because I am using a different microphone. Finally, I want to say a massive thank you to my channel members for their extra generous support as always. But with that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Baltasar de Silva served as Cesare Borgia's master spy and was a devoted member of the Templar Order. Though he posed as a humble barber, his true occupation was gathering intelligence for the Borgias, particularly on their greatest rivals, the Assassins. At one point, Baltasar partnered with Fiora Cavazza to study the Assassins more closely. Their method was bold. They used one of Cesare's senators as bait, a notoriously corrupt man who had already survived a previous assassination attempt. For several days, Baltasar and Fiora shadowed him in secret, waiting for the assassins to strike. They witnessed the senator's assassination firsthand and attempted to pursue the assassin afterward, but were unable to keep pace. Even so, Baltasar considered the mission a success. He carefully observed the assassin's movements, attire, and weapons, especially the hidden blade, and took detailed notes. He continued collecting intelligence in the days that followed, reporting everything directly to Fiora. Eventually, their research inspired a daring experiment. Baltasar and Fiora set out to manufacture an assassin of their own. To that end, they trained Il Lupo to imitate assassin techniques, teaching him to replicate both their combat style and weaponry. When Fiora betrayed Cesare and joined the assassins in 1503, she quickly realised that Baltasar posed a serious threat. He knew too much about her work with the Templars and about what she had shared with her new allies. To protect herself and cover her tracks, she convinced the assassins to target him after eliminating other Templar targets. The assassins initially planned to strike at Baltasar's barbershop, but Fiora warned them it was a decoy. Instead, she led them to his true hideout. Unfortunately, Baltasar had anticipated this. The entrance was rigged with traps. A tripwire triggered explosion at the doorway and a mannequin packed with abrasive powder, which injured one of the assassins when struck with a throwing knife. As they searched the hideout, Fiora spotted Baltasar outside with a torch in his hand. He froze when he recognised her. Moments later though, he set the building ablaze and the assassins escaped before the flames consumed it, but Baltasar vanished into the night. When Fiora later returned to the ruins of his hideout, she found a letter from him. He proposed a meeting at a nearby warehouse, promising a better deal. Fiora scouted the location carefully and entered to find Baltasar waiting alone at a table. He calmly analysed her motives for turning against Cesare, most of which were correct, and assured her he had not yet reported her treachery. Then he apologised and revealed that it was a trap. Hidden riflemen emerged from the shadows at his signal, but before they could fire, a volley of arrows cut them down. Fiora's assassin allies had followed her, and this time she was the one being rescued. Auguste Oberlin served as Cesare Borgia's personal blacksmith and was a devoted member of the Templar Order. He supplied weapons to many of Cesare's agents and was also responsible for designing and distributing Borgia propaganda throughout Rome. Born in Switzerland in 1468, Auguste began his adult life as a mercenary. After relocating to Rome, he first found work among the common folk, crafting shop signs for merchants. But his talent soon caught the attention of the Borgia, who recruited him into their service. Despite his imposing, rough exterior, Auguste was both an artist and an intellectual. He forged blades with precision and sketched propaganda posters with the eye of a perfectionist, often revising his designs multiple times before allowing them to be seen. Beyond traditional weaponry, Auguste also fulfilled Cesare's more unconventional requests, devices imagined by Borgia engineers and inventors. These orders were typically delivered by Fiora Cavazza. Auguste complied, though his wife openly resented Fiora's frequent visits. Their marriage deteriorated rapidly. During one of Fiora's visits, the couple erupted into a vicious argument, prompting Fiora to quietly take her leave. By 1503, their conflicts turned violent. Auguste struck his wife and then barricaded himself in his workshop, leaving her weeping outside their home in the Campagna district. It was there that Ezio found her. She explained the situation and urged him to destroy Auguste's propaganda posters, knowing that her husband's pride would force him to respond. Ezio complied. Enraged, Auguste emerged with several Borgia guards. The assassin dispatched the soldiers with ease, then ended Auguste's life at the age of 35 with a strike of the hidden blade. Donato Mancini, born in 1473, served as a military captain in the Papal army under Borgia command and was a member of the Templar Order. Known for his confidence and exceptional skill on horseback, he was frequently favoured by Cesare Borgia. In 1502, during a private horse race hosted by the Borgia, Fiora Cavazza was sent to persuade Donato, through bribery or intimidation, to let Cesare win. She presented him with an ornate set of armour, which he gladly tried on. Yet when she delivered Cesare's threat, Donato only smirked and replied, "The winner will win the race. There are no other factors." True to his word, Donato rode honourably and skillfully, even when Cesare's officer, Teodor Viscardi, attempted to sabotage him mid-race with a blade. Donato evaded the attack and charged ahead, winning before a speechless audience. In accordance with her orders, Fiora directed a group of mercenaries to beat Donato in retaliation, a spectacle the crowd enjoyed, though she privately admired him as the race's rightful victor. The following year, Donato lost a race to a merchant named Rocco. Instead of accepting defeat with dignity, he lashed out, destroying the merchant's stand and threatening to kill him. Ezio encountered the shaken merchant soon after and decided to intervene. Tracking Donato to the ruins of the Circus Maximus, Ezio found him training alongside his soldiers. The assassin gave chase, targeting Donato alone and killing him at the age of 30. Though Donato had once defied Cesare's manipulation and won through merit, he ultimately mirrored Cesare's own arrogance when faced with defeat. Perhaps the humiliation inflicted upon him in that earlier race had left a deeper scar than he cared to admit. Malfatto was a notorious serial killer of courtesans in Rome, feared widely enough to draw the attention of Cesare Borgia himself. Rather than having him executed, Cesare sought to recruit the murderous doctor into his personal ranks. In 1502, he sent his envoy Fiora Cavazza to deliver a letter of absolution as an invitation. Having once been a courtesan herself, Fiora was deeply unsettled by the assignment, but she obeyed. On her first attempt to track him down, Fiora wandered through one of the Rome's poorer districts. Instead of finding Malfatto, she heard the desperate cries of a woman begging for mercy. She ran toward the sound, only to arrive too late, faced with the grisly remains of Malfatto's latest victim. Shaken by what she had just seen, Fiora refused to continue the mission, but Cesare threatened her life, leaving her no choice. Disguised once more in the attire of a courtesan, she sent out again to lure Malfatto from hiding. When she finally encountered him, he immediately prepared to strike. She saved herself by only shouting Cesare's name and thrusting the letter toward him. Malfatto took it without a word but didn't bother to read it. He simply stared at her in eerie silence as she slowly backed away and left. Fiora then returned home believing she was safe, unaware that Malfatto had followed her. He crept to her bedside and injected her with his syringe. The sting of the needle jolted her awake, and in a panic, she snatched her bladed fan and lashed out, catching Malfatto off guard. Though the poison coursing through her veins left her disoriented, she managed to wound him severely before collapsing. Now that he was bleeding heavily, Malfatto fled through the window. Not long afterward, now officially under Cesare's employ, Malfatto resumed his hunts near the Tiber River. There he claimed another victim, a courtesan named Mina. Her friend discovered the body and wept over her until Ezio arrived at the scene. Ezio offered his help, and the grieving courtesan pleaded for justice and directed him to find the killer. Ezio tracked Malfatto through the district, guarded by other courtesans who pointed him along the way. He finally spotted Malfatto standing near a medical store. The murderer bolted, but Ezio was quick to pursue. After a short chase, he signalled his assassin recruits to strike. Once Malfatto lay dead, Ezio gently placed a hand over the killer's mask and offered him his final rites. Gaspar de la Croix, born in 1466, was a master engineer and marksman. Cesare Borgia frequently hired him for battlefield support, tasking him with picking off easy targets from a distance. In 1502, Fiora Cavazza visited Gaspar at Cesare's request to retrieve repaired parts and equipment. She found him in his workshop, quietly singing a sorrowful French song, and she hesitated to interrupt. Throughout her visit, she perceived him as distant and haunted. He asked her unsettling questions, whether she had witnessed death and if she believed it was dictated by fate, chance, or choice. As she prepared to leave, Gaspar refused payment. Fiora watched as he calmly began tinkering with a firearm, aiming it thoughtfully out of his front window at the pedestrians passing below. The sight made her so uneasy that she vowed to avoid walking past that window again. That following year in Rome, Gaspar took part in suppressing a civilian uprising against the Borgia. With expert precision, he gunned down protesters from afar with his arquebus. Just as the rebellion dwindled to a single survivor, Ezio Auditore happened upon the scene and joined the fray. Gaspar shot the last insurgent, but before he could reload, Ezio charged. The engineer attempted to flee but reached a dead end, and now that he was cornered, he tried to fight back, only to be fatally struck by Ezio's hidden blade, dying at the age of 37. Il Carnefice, born in 1473, was an executioner active in Rome during the late 15th and early 16th century. By around 1497, he was working directly under Cesare Borgia, often receiving orders through Fiora Cavazza. During one such exchange, Fiora delivered a list of Cesare's next condemned targets. Il Carnefice studied it solemnly before telling her that her name was on the list. After letting the tension build, he burst into laughter and admitted it was a prank and that he couldn't even read. As one of Cesare's executioners, Il Carnefice carried out his duties with disturbing enthusiasm. He relished the violence, often dismembering his victims and flaunting their remains before cheering crowds. Fiora once described him as a beast, more revolting than intimidating. In 1500, his cruelty escalated. He assaulted a woman named Olivia, then hanged her. Her husband, heartbroken, remained at her side, refusing to leave her body under the threat of execution. Enraged by the man's defiance, Il Carnefice sent guards to arrest him. This drew the attention of Ezio, and so he intervened, rescuing the grieving widower. Then, after hearing his story, Ezio encouraged him to take down his wife's body and promised to deal with Il Carnefice himself. Ezio kept that promise. He infiltrated the executioner's cliffside residence in the northwestern Centro district, where Il Carnefice was boasting about his latest kill. From above, Ezio struck swiftly with his hidden blade, killing the Templar at age 27. Lanz was born in 1480, and he once lived a quieter life. He fell in love, married, and was expecting a child. But when the baby was miscarried, his world collapsed. Consumed by grief, he drifted into crime and eventually joined the Cento Ochi, a rowdy gang of young thieves notorious for clashing with the Roman Thieves Guild and murdering their enemies by throwing them from rooftops. In time, Lanz rose to become their leader. In 1502, he caught the attention of the Borgia after he and his gang robbed one of their carriages. Fiora Cavazza arrived on Cesare Borgia's behalf to deal with him. At first, Lanz dismissed her until she tossed a knife at his feet, one he recognised as his own. Realising his mistake, he panicked and offered to return the stolen money, but Fiora had other plans. Rather than punish him, she conscripted him. From that point on, Lanz and the Cento Ochi began running payments for the Borgia. That same year, tragedy struck again. Lanz's wife, overcome by despair over what he had become, threatened to take her own life if he did not return to her. She climbed to a rooftop ready to jump, hoping the sight would bring him back to himself, but Ezio reached her first. He calmed her, assuring her that she bore no blame for Lanz's actions and that he would deal with the man she once loved. Ezio tracked Lanz to the southwestern edge of the Centro district, where the thief was leaping across rooftops. Lanz spotted him and fled, hoping his agility would save him. But Ezio was relentless. Eventually, he caught up and struck with his hidden blade, ending Lanz's life at age 23. Cahin and Cahar were a twisted duo of French noble-born siblings who abandoned all dignity in favour of bloodshed and theatrics. Clad in matching Harlequin costumes, they turned murder into performance art, and Cesare Borgia eagerly hired them for it. Around 1497, they staged a lively show to lure a foreign noble, rumoured to have royal blood, into letting his guard down. As Cahar dazzled the crowd by juggling her daggers, Cahin silently slipped behind their target and drove a blade through his chair, killing him instantly. Then the real performance began. At Fiora Cavazza's signal, Cahar whipped her daggers into the throats of two unsuspecting guests, while Fiora herself joined the slaughter. By the time the screams stopped, every spectator lay dead. Years later, in 1502, Fiora was betrayed by Cesare and defected to the assassins, determined to make her former allies pay. In 1503, she led a strike team to hunt down Cahin and Cahar, who were once again performing in the streets of Rome. Cahar was the first to notice. Without hesitation, she hurled a smoke bomb into the crowd to cover their escape. As civilians scattered, Cahin made a run for it, but the assassins were ready. Cornered, he drew a dagger and fought with surprising agility, dodging rapier thrusts with practiced grace. But it wasn't enough. The assassins overwhelmed him, striking him down together. Cahar saw her brother die and she snapped. Consumed by rage, she didn't flee or beg. Instead, she lunged straight for Fiora, determined to tear her apart with her own hands. The assassins held back, forming a silent ring as the two women clashed steel against steel. Cahar fought like an animal cornered, each strike fueled by grief. But Fiora held her ground. Blow by blow, Cahar's fury burnt out, replaced by exhaustion. At last, her strength gave way, and she dropped her weapons to crawl to Cahin's lifeless body. There she gathered him into her arms. Shortly after, an assassin stepped forward with a crossbow ready in their hand. Cahar never turned around. The bolt struck clean through her skull, ending the Harley Quinn act forever, just as she clutched her brother one last time. There's really not much information on Verullo Gallo. He was a knight in Renaissance Italy, and from what little we do know, he had a solid reputation as a military leader. His army won battles pretty consistently, which made him valuable, and he knew it. Because of his success rate, he charged higher prices for his services. And that's basically it. No records of his personal life, no major events tied to him, no known alliances or betrayals. Just a guy who led armies, won fights, and made sure he got paid for it. Charles de la Motte, a French marquis and seasoned warrior, served both his homeland and the Templar cause with ruthless pride. As one of Cesare Borgia's key allies, he commanded a formidable host of French mercenaries, answering only to his master and his order. In 1503, he arrived at Barletta, eager to prove French superiority over the Italian knights fighting for the Spanish crown. Yet before the first lance was lowered, unseen hands were already at work. An assassin team intent on igniting discord between the Templars struck in secret. Under the cover of darkness, Tessa Varzi dusted the French combatants' supplies with a subtle poison, one so expertly applied that not even seasoned physicians could sense the tampering. When the sun rose over the field, the French knights faltered, slow in reflex, weak in breath, and unfocused in battle. Their Italian opponents claimed a clean victory, and no accusation of cheating could be made. Later that year, Cesare summoned Charles and his men to Rome. The papal armies stood aside, granting the mercenaries free passage through the city. With no one to restrain them, the French soldiers turned the streets into their playground, harassing citizens, stealing openly, and barking insults at anyone who dared protest. The city guards offered only warnings to the victims and safe passage to the offenders. The assassins could not stand idle. Under the command of Francesco Vecellio, they orchestrated swift retaliation. From the shadows, arrows struck down unsuspecting mercenaries, while others succumbed to delicately poisoned flowers slipped into their hands by Tessa Varzi. The attacks were precise, sending a message without revealing the full strength of the Brotherhood. But the combined fury of the French forces and the Borgia troops soon overwhelmed the small assassin team. Forced to withdraw, they sought refuge in a nearby inn, hoping to regroup. Their enemies followed, not with swords, but with fire. The building was set ablaze, and many assassins were lost in the inferno. By 1503, the damage Charles caused was not forgotten. Among those who had lost comrades was the assassin Francesco Vecellio, who had resolved to end the French Marquis's life himself. Before taking action, Francesco brought his intentions to Ezio Auditore, mentor of the Italian Brotherhood. Tradition demanded permission, but Francesco made it clear he would act regardless of Ezio's answer. Ezio saw the fire burning in him and spoke plainly. Revenge, he admitted, was a powerful fuel, but one that could easily be consumed by the man who carried it. Francesco's anger, untempered, could lead to recklessness and failure. Rather than risk his brother's life or the mission's integrity, Ezio chose to shoulder the burden himself. After tracking Charles, Ezio hunted the Templar down and struck without hesitation. The Marquis fell with defiance still on his tongue, refusing repentance, secrets, all acknowledgement of guilt. Even at the edge of death, Charles clung to his pride and the silence of his order. Rocco Topolo was no mere sellsword. He was a Templar captain and a commander of men whose loyalty was brought in blood and coin. Though he supplied mercenaries to Cesare Borgia, he served no master but his own ambition. Around 1497, Fiora Cavazza was dispatched to strike a deal with him. Rocco welcomed her with the kind of hospitality only a man surrounded by killers could afford. Fine food, strong wine, and violence for sport. At his command, 2 of his men fought for their amusement, trading steel until the floor ran slick with blood. Rocco then showcased paintings of his past campaigns, tributes to victories he claimed with pride. In decades of command, he boasted he had only lost twice, and neither time he had been the one given the orders. When Fiora evaluated his forces for Cesare's purposes, Rocco praised their skill and savagery, insisting that each had slain countless rivals. Once payment was made, he handed over the soldiers' contracts. Fiora even tried to purchase Rocco's own allegiance, but he refused, stating that if Cesare wanted his sword, he'd have to pay more than anyone else. Years later, the alliance shattered. In 1503, after Cesare betrayed Fiora and she defected to the assassins, she turned her attention to the enemies she had once called allies. Rocco was the first on her list. She didn't seek his death out of hatred, but his men were still bound to Cesare by gold, and the Brotherhood could never match that price. Eliminating him was the only way to cut off his support. With a strike force of assassins at her back, Fiora launched an assault on his stronghold and training grounds. Arrows fell and blades flashed as his men outside the walls were cut down. Fiora assessed the defences, then led the push inside, where Rocco and his veteran fighters stood their ground. The clash was brutal on both sides. One by one, Rocco's warriors were cut down until only he remained. Rather than surrender, he did what he had always promised he would. He charged headlong into the fray, facing impossible odds with steel in hand. Outnumbered but unbroken, Rocco Topolo died the honourable death he had long imagined. Silvestro Sabatini was born in 1472, and though he liked to dress himself in titles and silk, he was no actual noble. He was a human trafficker and a Templar loyal to Cesare Borgia. He clawed his way upward through flattery, cruelty and coin. He was the cousin to Andrea Sabatini, a student of Raphael, but Silvestro's ambitions were far removed from the art of honour. At some point he struck a deal with the Borgias, trading loyalty for status. That loyalty didn't spare him when he failed Cesare. After botching a mission involving a courtesan sometime before 1502, he was dragged before Micheletto Carella. As punishment, Micheletto severed Silvestro's left arm. When Silvestro's services became useful again, Fiora Cavazza was sent to deliver a replacement, a mechanical arm forged by Cesare's engineer. Silvestro scoffed at first, sneering that the arm was too plain, unadorned by jewels or rare metals. But when Fiora offered to take it back to Cesare, he seized the device and fitted it to his shoulder without another complaint. Restored at least in function, Silvestro resumed his work under Borgia command. From Palatine Hill, he ran a slave operation that preyed on Rome itself. His men snatched citizens from the streets, men, women, and even children, and loaded them onto ships bound for profit. In 1502, fate turned. Ezio came across a young boy weeping in the streets, his mother taken by Silvestro's men. Ezio chose to intervene. Tracking Sabatini through the Centro district, he shadowed him back to his base at Palatine Hill. Once there, Silvestro was seen negotiating over his captives with a woman, only to send her away in a rage when she dared question his mechanical arm. His thoughts turned dark, he seemed ready to silence her permanently, but he never got the chance. Ezio did not strike alone, he dispatched the assassin recruits to end Sabatini's life once and for all. Little is recorded of Teodore's origins or exploits, but his loyalty to Cesare Borgia placed him wherever his master required, even in the dirt and dust of a racetrack. In 1502, Teodore rode at Cesare's side during a horse race rigged in the Templars' favour. The favourite to win was Donato Mancini. Cesare would not tolerate a loss to a common competitor. Mid-race, Teodore turned his horse into a weapon and drew steel, slashing at Mancini in an effort to force him from the course. But Donato was quicker than expected. He dodged Teodore's attacks and surged ahead, winning the race in full view of the Italian spectators, and worse, Cesare himself. Teodore's interference failed, and Cesare's fury was all the reward he received. Again, there is not much known about the pariah, other than his name is Ilario Lombardi, and he lived on the fringes of Renaissance society, shunned by those around him long before his life took a darker turn. At some point, he crossed paths with the assassins, an encounter that ended in blood and left him broken. Their attack carved deep scars into his flesh and deeper wounds into his mind. The disfigurement and trauma drove Ilario into seclusion. No longer willing to show his face, he dressed in layered garments and hid behind a cold metal mask, using it as both armour and a barrier. Whatever life he'd lived before was replaced by shadows, silence, and the memory of blades. Interestingly, he bears a striking resemblance to the Templar target shown in the Assassin's Creed 2 E3 trailer, which is pretty cool to see. Ristoro, born in 1465, was a Minim priest in name only and a Templar in truth. Despite his vows, he was a regular at the Rosa in Fiore, the most sought-after brothel in Rome. Around 1500, when Cesare Borgia began gathering useful allies, Ristoro quickly caught his attention. In exchange for a steady supply of girls to satisfy his vices, Ristoro provided Cesare with things only the church could grant: sacred icons, forged amulets, official seals, coins for bribes, and letters of condemnation or absolution as needed. His corruption was a valuable commodity. Fiora Cavazza had known him during her time as a courtesan, and despised him for his perversity. When she later entered Cesare's service and was forced to deliver girls to him once again, she hoped he wouldn't remember her. He did. He singled her out, stroked her cheek, and called her his favourite until she drove her boot into his groin, and threatened him with Cesare's anger. He shrank back, only to reach for her again, before being distracted by the other girls. Ristoro's depravity drew suspicion from his fellow clergy. 2 of his own students once confronted him, and he quietly poisoned both of them. The Borgia brought him absolution. When another brother dared to speak the truth publicly near the Colosseum, Ezio heard him out and decided action was needed. Ezio tracked Ristoro to a church where the priest stood flanked by Borgia guards and armed with a spear. The assassin dispatched the soldiers with ease and struck from above, driving his hidden blade into the corrupt priest and ending his life once and for all. Il Lupo, or the Wolf in English, was a Templar agent trained to mimic the assassins themselves. After Fiora Cavazza and Baltasar had spent time stalking and studying the Brotherhood, they decided to fashion a weapon in their likeness. They trained Il Lupo in everything they had observed: the assassin's agility, their stealth, their killing techniques. To complete the imitation, he was given his own version of the hidden blade. Once his training was complete and his orders drilled into him, Cesare Borgia dispatched him on missions as a counterfeit assassin in the Templar service. Eventually, Fiora was betrayed by Cesare and defected to the assassins, but that left a danger behind. Il Lupo knew too much about what she had learned, and as long as he lived, he was a threat to her new allies. Eliminating him would both protect herself and scrub away evidence of her past work. To draw him out, Fiora left a coded signal on the Pasquino statue. She then waited for him at the docks at sunset, shadowed by an assassin sent to guard her. She was still recovering from a recent attempt on her life by Baltasar. But the wolf arrived first, silently killed her escort and dumped the body into the river before warning Fiora that she'd been followed. Thinking quickly, Fiora spun a lie. Cesare had supposedly ordered a target killed aboard a ship in the harbour. The wolf turned to survey it, asking how he was meant to reach the vessel unseen. That moment of distraction was all she needed. Fiora struck from behind with a poisoned iron fan, slicing it into his back. He lashed out, struck her, and drew his rapier, but the toxin was already at work. He choked, vomited, and spat curses and questions at her as he died. An imitation assassin undone by the very deception he'd been moulded to emulate. Leah de Russo was born in 1476, and she was a seasoned smuggler of rare goods who operated from several hideouts across Rome, including the ruins of the Baths of Caracalla in the Campania district. She was also a Templar agent, and from 1497 to 1503, she worked under Cesare Borgia, supplying him with contraband and valuable artifacts. Fiora Cavazza, who acted as Cesare's courier, was typically the one sent to collect these deliveries. On one of these runs, Fiora followed Leah into a shop the smuggler used as a stash point. The place smelled of death, Fiora observed, half expecting to find the actual shopkeeper's corpse tucked away somewhere. Leah's stock ranged from mundane trinkets to priceless antiquities, but she always made it clear she expected full payment and a generous tip for every deal. In 1503, Leah accepted a contract to eliminate a young shopkeeper named Monica. The woman had refused to shut down her store when the Borgia claimed control over the district, and Leah was sent to make an example. Ezio encountered Monica's grieving fiancé, and after learning what had happened, vowed to hunt Leah down. He tracked her to the Baths of Caracalla, where she was standing over yet another fresh kill. The moment she spotted Ezio, she bolted, shouting insults as she ran. But the chase was short-lived. Ezio overtook her and dispatched her with his hidden blade. Leah holds a small but notable place in assassin history. She was the first woman Ezio ever killed, and one of only 3 female targets he eliminates across the entire series. Faustina Collari was a thief in Renaissance Rome, born into poverty and driven to stealing simply to stay alive. She was intensely close to her brother, and the two relied on one another completely. Faustina swore she would protect him with her life, just as he always looked out for her. Their bond was so strong that they split a single pair of scissors into 2 blades, fashioning matching weapons to carry with them. However, at some point, Faustina failed to keep her promise she made. Her brother was lost, and the weight of that broken vow stayed with her forever. And that is all we know about her. The earliest thing we know about Fiora was that in 1497 she lived and worked as a courtesan in the Rosa in Fiore brothel, which is in Rome, under the management of Madonna Solari, but life within the walls never satisfied her. Ambitious and determined, Fiora hoped to win the favour of influential clients, enough that one of them might one day grant her a way out. She often slipped beyond the brothel to gather information and cultivate allies, a habit that earned her both admiration and jealousy from the other girls. Among her acquaintances was Brother Ristoro, a former patron who insisted on speaking with her often. Fiora endured his company despite finding both him and his perversions repulsive. During her time there, Fiora and another courtesan, Lucia, were sent to escort Solari's brother, Santino. The assignment quickly turned grim. Santino treated them with cruelty, and Fiora could tell that whatever shady dealings he was involved in, they were beginning to fall apart. Not long after, a new client arrived at the Rosa in Fiore, Cesare Borgia. Charming, enigmatic, and unlike any man who had came before, Fiora was instantly drawn to him. She assumed he had come to hire her, but Cesare soon clarified otherwise. Santino had already been punished for meddling in business beyond his reach, and to spare both his and Solari's lives, they had allowed Cesare to claim one courtesan of his choosing. He chose Fiora. From 1497 to 1502, Fiora served Cesare Borgia with unwavering loyalty, posing as a courtesan while living under his protection. In her very first year in his employ, Cesare ordered her to seduce and assassinate his brother Juan on Tiber Island, clearing the way for Cesare to claim the title of Captain General. Over time, Fiora not only managed many of his Templar agents, but eventually began recruiting them herself. One of the first agents that she worked with was Brother Ristoro, the same corrupt clergyman who once frequented the Rosa in Fiore. He provided Cesare with religious relics and forged letters for distribution as needed. Another loyal supplier was Leah de Russo, a smuggler who trafficked in everything from worthless trinkets to priceless antiquities. Fiora also came to know Auguste Oberlin, Cesare's personal blacksmith. Acting as a messenger between them, she often delivered Cesare's requests for weapons and supplies. Auguste complied, though his wife clearly resented the arrangement. Fiora watched as their marriage gradually unravelled, noting how the couple would growl at each other like wild dogs whenever she departed. In 1502, Fiora visited Gaspard de la Croix, Cesare's engineer. She found him alone in his house, singing a sorrowful French tune, and hesitated before making her presence known. To her, he seemed a man burdened by ghosts. His questions about death unsettled her, and when she prepared to leave, he refused any payment. As she walked out, she noticed him quietly adjusting an arquebus, its barrel aimed deliberately at the people passing beyond his window. From then on, Fiora chose her path past the house with great caution. In time, Fiora was charged with expanding Cesare's underground army, a group she referred to as his personal collection of misfits. The first recruit on her list was Rocco Tipolo, a seasoned captain from whom she was to secure the finest mercenaries available. She was then tasked with bribing Donato Mancini, renowned as Cesare's best horseman, to intentionally lose a race scheduled for that day. Donato, however, remained unmoved by Fiora's bribes and threats. Even after Cesare dispatched an officer to sabotage him, Donato still won the race. Next, Fiora met with the Cento Oci, a band of thieves led by a young man named Lanz, whom Cesare suspected of robbing one of the Borgia carriages. Rather than punish them, Fiora negotiated a deal. Lanz would return the stolen money, and in exchange, his gang would enter Cesare's service. Cesare later paired Fiora with Baltasar da Silva to observe one of their greatest enemies, the Order of Assassins. Together they witnessed one of Cesare's senators being slain in broad daylight. Though Fiora felt humiliated when the assassin escaped, Baltasar remained optimistic, intrigued by the glimpse they'd gained of their weapons and tactics. Fiora's next assignment brought her into the company of Cahin and Kahar, a brother and sister duo of harlequins. She found them totally mad yet fun. The three of them proceeded to massacre a group of onlookers who had gathered to watch the siblings perform. She then met Il Carnifice, a sadistic executioner who revelled in the brutality of his work. Fiora considered him more revolting than fearsome, but still she served as a messenger between him and Cesare, delivering instructions whenever needed. Her final task in this string of errands was to approach Silvestro Sabatini. Fiora offered him a second chance in Cesare's service, presenting a prosthetic arm forged by Gaspar. At first, Silvestro scoffed at the gift, demanding jewels and rare metals to embellish it, but when Fiora casually threatened to take it back to Cesare, he snatched it from her and strapped it on without another word. Cesare's final assignment for Fiora was perhaps his most disturbing. She was to make contact with Malfatto, a deranged doctor notorious for butchering the courtesans of Rome. The task terrified her, not only because of his reputation, but because she herself had once been a courtesan. Still, Cesare insisted she deliver a letter of absolution to earn his allegiance. Her first attempt to track him down ended in horror. She found only his most recent victim sprawled in a pool of blood. On her second attempt, Fiora dressed once more in her old courtesan attire, hoping to draw him out. When Malfatto finally appeared, he lunged straight at her, but she managed to hold him by shouting Cesare's name and thrusting the letter into his hands. That night, Fiora returned to the house Cesare had gifted her, but sleep would not come. In the dead of night, she felt a sharp sting at her neck. Startled, she reached up, not to swat a bug, but to find Malfatto pressing a syringe into her skin. The drug took hold quickly, but not before Fiora slashed him with her metal fan. She blacked out soon after. When she awoke, Malfatto was gone, but something in her had changed. Her loyalty to Cesare had fractured. She resolved to betray him. Fiora then compiled a list of Cesare's most trusted agents, the same ones she had carefully recruited, and sent it to the assassins. To her surprise, the one sent to retrieve her was none other than the young painter Francesco Vecellio. Fiora joined forces with the assassins and helped eliminate the very agents she had once recruited. The first to fall was Rocco Tipolo. She later assisted in the deaths, or at least the downfalls, of Cahin and Kahar, Baltasar da Silva, and finally Il Lupo. Once her vengeance against the Templar agents was complete, Fiora answered a summons from Cesare Borgia. When she arrived, she caught the eye of his presumed son, Giovanni. Later, Fiora and Cesare shared a quiet dinner, but their civility barely masked a deep mutual distrust. Cesare pressed her about the sudden disappearance of his allies and her rumoured dealings with the assassins, but Fiora denied everything. Later that night, Giovanni spotted her sneaking through the house in search of the hidden Apple of Eden. Mistaking her mission for play, he grabbed the artifact and darted away, gleefully challenging her to chase him. Fiora panicked as she tried to retrieve the piece of Eden, but its power froze her in place. Awakened by the commotion, Cesare approached the immobilized Fiora. When Giovanni asked Cesare if he intended to hurt her, Cesare answered calmly that he would. Her fate, it seemed, was sealed. Like many characters on this list, there is not much known about Kadir's early life. However, Kadir served as an arms dealer and information broker for the Byzantine Rite of the Templar Order during the early 16th century. He also operated covertly as an agent of the Kizilbash, a loose coalition of Shia Turkmen militant groups that rebelled against the Ottoman Empire during the same period. As part of his dual role, Kadir was assigned to undermine the Ottoman military from within by joining their artillery corps and working to sabotage its operations. Samila Kadim was a high-ranking Templar who used her noble background to obtain information and manipulate people, ultimately delivering them to her patron's control. Unlike most upper-class Templars who typically stayed removed from direct violence, Samila had a strong inclination toward killing and was known for relentlessly targeting anyone who crossed her. Her wealth came from dealing in relics, confidential information, and other valuable items on behalf of the Templars. She has some similarities with Leah de Russo, the smuggler from Brotherhood, as both women worked in the trade of artifacts and valuable goods for the Templars, and wore outfits featuring a green colour palette. Right, so this is the first character that actually has a decent amount of information about him. Georgios Kostas was a member of the Byzantine Rite within the Templar Order, known for his exceptional physical strength and violent methods. Originally from Greece, he later travelled to the mountains of Thrace to fight, where he gained recognition as a skilled and formidable warrior. His reputation eventually attracted the attention of the Templars, who recruited him and granted him the privilege of fighting under their banner. In 1511, while in Constantinople, Georgios was assigned to kill a local printer. The target, however, was being protected by an assassin apprentice, who escorted him through the city, with their mentor Ezio Auditore observing from above. When the printer saw Georgios in the street, Georgios ordered the apprentice not to interfere. The printer escaped while the apprentice engaged Georgios in combat. Ezio pursued the fleeing printer and defended him from a Byzantine attack in a nearby cemetery. After making sure that the printer was safe, Ezio returned to assist his apprentice. He found the apprentice resting against a wall, explaining that they had just narrowly defeated Georgios, but had never encountered someone with such overwhelming strength. Ezio cautioned the apprentice to stay alert, believing that Georgios would return. Later in 1511, Ezio met again with the same apprentice, who reported that Georgios was now targeting the printer's father, a local herald. The two assassins met with the herald to warn him about the danger created by his son's situation, and during their conversation, Templar thugs attacked, interrupting the meeting. Although the assassins successfully fought off the attackers, Georgios appeared and seized the herald, demanding that the printer to be brought to him. Ezio's apprentice climbed to a ledge overlooking Georgios, while Ezio positioned himself across from them to divert Georgios' attention. While Georgios focused on Ezio, the apprentice dropped from above and killed him. As he died, Georgios claimed that even though the assassins had ended his life, his reputation as a champion would endure. His exact birthday is unknown, but his death occurred in 1511. Evelyn Guerrero was a pirate who targeted ships coming back from treasure hunting voyages. She would wait until the crews returned exhausted and vulnerable, then have her group of loyal followers strike. This approach proved highly effective, and a significant portion of the stolen goods she acquired was used to support Templar activities. Unfortunately, this is all we know about her. Vlad Tepes, also known as Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Draculesti, and Dracula, was the Voivod of Wallachia, ruling the territory at several points between 1448 and 1476. Born between 1428 and 1431, Vlad was secretly aligned with the Templars and contributed significantly to their efforts against the Ottoman Empire. In 1476, he attempted to start an uprising in Hungary, but was defeated by the Ottoman Grand Vizier Ishak Pasha, who also served as the mentor of the Ottoman assassins. After his capture, Vlad was killed and his decapitated head was sent to Constantinople as a display of victory. Both his head and his sword were later placed in a specially constructed prison outside of the Constantinian walls. The Wallachian noble and assassin Vali Saltradat admired Vlad and believed the Ottomans were responsible for his death due to their truce with the assassins. But I will talk more about Vali later in the video. In 1511, Ezio retrieved Vlad's sword from the location where it had been stored. Vlad eventually became the source of various vampire legends associated with his name. Folklore claimed he might have been a vampire due to his pale complexion and his tendency to remain indoors for long periods. These stories, combined with his harsh and violent actions as a ruler, formed the basis of the vampiric mythology connected to the Wallachian Voivod. Adding to these rumours, his tomb was reported to contain a skull with unusually long canine teeth. Harras was an apprentice of the Levantine Brotherhood who became frustrated with his slow advancement within the order. This dissatisfaction ultimately led him to defect to the Templars and assist them in their attack on Masyaf. In 1189, Harras betrayed the assassins by guiding a Templar force to launch a siege on their stronghold. The assault resulted in the deaths of many assassins, and their mentor Al-Muwalim was taken prisoner. When Altair returned to Masyaf, he fought through the occupied village and confronted Harras, who threatened to kill Al-Muwalim. Harras then withdrew to the fortress, now under Templar control, and executed the remaining assassin captives, Vahid Ahmedi, Razit el-Zubaydi, and Fad el-Fahmi, by using a crossbow. Although the portcullis was closed to keep Altair out, he climbed the fortress walls and killed Harras from above. In his final moments, Harras rejected the assassins and insisted that the Templars possessed the true understanding of humanity, maintaining that the Assassin's Creed was misguided. Centuries afterwards, in 2014, Master Templar Juhani Otzoberg referenced Harras's defection as an example that some assassins would always be willing to abandon their order in favour of the Templar cause. Altair believed that Harras preferred shortcuts rather than progressing through the ranks through genuine effort. Harras was also known for being highly adaptable in combat and for adjusting his demeanour to match those around him, a skill he often used to uncover information about others. Cyril of Rhodes began his life as a priest in the Eastern Orthodox Church. After being publicly shamed by Pachomius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, for behaviour deemed unbecoming of the faith, Cyril spent 10 years planning revenge. During this period, he abandoned the doctrines he once supported and used his remaining position in the church to undermine it from within, aligning himself with Templar goals. When Cyril began plotting to assassinate the Patriarch, an assassin apprentice learned of the rumour and informed Ezio. The information mentioned only a Templar agent operating in the area without naming Cyril directly. Because his identity was unclear, Ezio and the apprentice searched for the operative and eventually met a church member familiar with Cyril's background and location. After receiving this information, they went to the described site and found 3 individuals who all had a match with the description. Since all 3 appeared nearly identical, Ezio attempted to use his eagle sense to determine which one was Cyril. Before he could act, the apprentice hastily attacked the wrong person, allowing Cyril to escape unharmed. After the apprentice gained more experience, Ezio brought him back to resume the search for Cyril. When they went to meet their previous contact, they found him dead, killed by Cyril to prevent him from revealing more information. Using his abilities, Ezio tracked Cyril's movements starting from the body. He eventually spotted Cyril speaking with a group of civilians and determined that the apprentice needed to create a distraction so he could observe Cyril without being noticed. Following Ezio's instructions, the apprentice stole Cyril's pouch and fled, prompting Cyril to chase after them while Ezio followed from a distance. The apprentice led Cyril to a small balcony and then revealed their connection to the assassins. Cyril then declared that he would not allow an assassin to stop his plans and attempted to fight the apprentice. Ezio intervened quickly and killed Cyril with his hidden blade, bringing the pursuit to an end sometime in 1511. Anakletos was an orphan who was sold into slavery at a young age and trained as a gladiator. As he competed in the arenas, his developing combat abilities drew the attention of the Templars, who eventually recruited him. From that point on, he pursued his assigned targets with determination and brutality. Although he served the Templars, Anakletos showed little interest in their ideology, instead using his affiliation as a justification for killing. Unfortunately, there is no available information about the specific period during which he was active as a gladiator. Oday Dunkas was a cousin of the first Sultan of the Sennar Sultanate and a member of the Byzantine Rite of the Templar Order. In 1505, he was forced to leave his homeland for reasons that remain unknown, leading to a separation from his family. After eventually relocating to Alexandria, he was introduced to the Templar ideology, which he fully accepted, calling himself the guardian of the truth. He soon joined the order, believing it would enable him to achieve his personal goals. Around this time, an apprentice working under Ezio reported suspicious bribery activity occurring in the markets near the Constantine South Assassin Den. Investigating the situation, Ezio went to a marketplace where he encountered Oday, though he did not yet know who he was. Using his eagle vision, Ezio identified which merchants had received bribe money, and then questioned a nearby individual about the person working with Oday. He learned that the associate was named Theodoros Komnenos. Ezio and his apprentice travelled across the rooftops to reach Theodoros's residence without being detected. After entering quietly, Ezio confronted Theodoros, revealing that he and the apprentice were assassins. Theodoros immediately panicked and begged for his life, but seeing his terrified state, Ezio chose to leave the apprentice with him so they could obtain the information they need once Theodoros regained his composure. When Ezio and the apprentice met with Theodoros again, they overheard him describing O'Day's activities and those of his fellow Templars. He entertained that their plan was to artificially raise prices in districts controlled by the assassins in order to turn public opinion against them. Ezio and the apprentice followed Theodoros to his meeting with O'Day. During their discussion, O'Day offered Theodoros a secure position in Alexandria if he continued cooperating with the Templars. Initially silent, Theodoros soon confessed that the assassins had been tailing him. Angered by this revelation, O'Day stabbed Theodoros and ordered his bodyguard to discard the body in the street. Ezio reacted quickly, sending the apprentice after O'Day while he pursued and killed the bodyguard. When Ezio returned to the chase, he found O'Day attempting to escape and intercepted him, cutting off his path. In his final words, O'Day claimed that being struck down by the assassins fulfilled his life's purpose. There is really not much known about Scaevola Spina, other than he was a knight active in Constantinople in the early 16th century who supported the Templars with his combat skills. He followed their directives without hesitation and eliminated any targets they assigned to him. His preferred weapon was a massive greatsword. Serafo was a Venetian expatriate and Templar agent residing in the Ottoman Empire. His medical practice declined over time, leading to more patient deaths than recoveries. Similar to the Roman Templar Dr. Malfatto, he used a syringe, but his contained a mercury-based solution that he developed himself. Dorcamaro was a Venetian expatriate in the Renaissance period who worked as a jester in Constantinople. After his behaviour contributed to the political downfall of a vizier favoured by the Sultan, he began carrying out assignments for the Templars. Unlike the French Templar operative Cahine, who used multiple weapons, Dorcamaro relied on a single Kandjar-style dagger to kill the targets he was ordered to eliminate. Blaise Legros was a mercenary naval captain who worked for any client willing to pay him. His primary motivation was financial gain, and he had no long-term loyalties. Although he transported paying passengers or cargo, he was known for taking contracts with full awareness that some of those he carried were unlikely to survive their journeys. He operated independently, forming temporary partnerships only when they benefited him financially. People who could not pay for his services were sometimes intentionally abandoned or misdirected, leading to frequent seizures of ships and individuals at sea. Vali was born into Wallachian nobility and joined the assassins in his early 20s. He remained committed to the creed for close to 10 years. When the assassins agreed to a truce with the Ottoman Sultan Bayezid II, Vali saw that decision as a betrayal of his homeland, believing it ignored past Ottoman conquests in Wallachia and the killing of his personal role model, Vlad Tepes. As a result, he left the assassins to join the Templars. Seeking retaliation against both the Ottoman Empire and the Assassin Order, his prior assassin training made him a highly effective operative, and he quickly became one of the Templars' most dangerous and feared enforcers. By 1511, Vali had killed multiple assassin members, drawing attention from an experienced assassin apprentice, who alerted the Italian assassin mentor, Ezio Auditore. Investigating a courtyard, Ezio used his eagle vision to find signs of Vali's recent kills. During the search, Vali appeared, killed an Ottoman guard from above, and fled. Ezio and the apprentice pursued him, but when the apprentice attempted to attack Vali from a rooftop and missed, nearby Byzantine guards intervened in response to Vali's calls for assistance. This disruption gave Vali enough time to escape. Vali later staged a diversion by capturing 2 assassins and placing them under Byzantine guard. This forced Ezio's attention towards a rescue operation, giving Vali enough time to infiltrate the assassins' main headquarters without opposition. Once the captives were freed, Vali ordered a Byzantine attack on the assassin-controlled Galata Den. The resulting conflict caused significant casualties for both the assassins and the Templars. Shortly after the battle, Vali and Ezio faced each other briefly before Vali attempted to withdraw again. He was intercepted by the same assassin apprentice who had previously investigated his activities. This time, the apprentice launched a successful attack from a rooftop, which killed Vali. Before he died, Vali stated that he defected because he believed the Assassin Order had acted against the interests of his homeland. He maintained that he could not continue serving a group he felt had failed his people. He soon died after making this statement. Lysistrata was a prominent Byzantine performer in Constantinople who also came from a wealthy background. She received artistic training and financial backing from the Templars and used her social influence to support their interests. She interacted with visiting Ottoman officials and used personal appeal and relationships to gather information that benefited the Templars. In 1511, Lysistrata travelled through the Imperial South District with a male associate. Their movements attracted the attention of Ezio and one of his apprentices, who began monitoring them. The apprentice followed them at street level while Ezio observed from the rooftops. When Lysistrata and her associate stopped at the city's hippodrome to talk, she noticed the approaching apprentice. She then wounded her associate with a dagger and immediately deployed a smoke device to cover her escape. The apprentice attempted to stop her but was unable to reach her before she disappeared. Afterward, Ezio and the apprentice pursued the direction she fled, discovering multiple dead men in the area. This indicated that her objective had included further killings and that the deaths were connected to the Templar operations. Later in 1511, Ezio met with the same apprentice, who had since advanced to the position of an assassin den leader. The apprentice informed him that Lysistrata intended to perform publicly, using a stage alias. Ezio noted that Lysistrata was aware of the risks of exposing herself, but had allowed personal pride to influence her decision. He and the den leader then went to the waterfront, where the performance was scheduled. Both assassins planned to intervene directly, rather than observe from a distance. Ezio approached the audience and killed Lysistrata while she was addressing the crowd. As she died, Lysistrata argued that although the assassins were effective in their work, a complete victory in their conflict would remove complexity from society. Mirella Juric was a Romani operative who worked with the Templars by providing access to a large underground network involved in theft, smuggling, and organised crime. She was known locally as a skilled thief and fortune teller, but she also gained notoriety for exploiting low-income communities through deceptive schemes. These actions led to internal opposition, and some Romani groups attempted to remove her from position. The conflicts surrounding her activities were reported to an assassin apprentice, who informed Ezio after being appointed leader of the Constantine North District. The apprentice initially requested Ezio's help protecting a Romani delegation en route to confront Mirella. During the escort, Mirella deployed multiple hired attackers to intercept them, but Ezio defeated all of them. When the group reached the meeting point, Mirella was already speaking with other Romani members, who criticised her methods and accused her of deception. Mirella reacted by killing one of the Romani critics with poison and staggering the scene to make it appear that the incoming delegation was responsible. While the apprentice attempted to pursue and stop her, Mirella escaped before she could be reached. After her attack on fellow Romani members, Mirella was later seen purchasing herbs and spices in a marketplace. Among the items she brought was datura, a plant that can be used to produce a highly toxic poison. The assassins were already familiar with datura, as it was one of their several ingredients they used in explosive devices and smoke-based tools. After receiving the report, Ezio used enhanced tracking skills to locate her. When he detected a recent trail linked to the plant, he chose to continue alone and instructed the apprentice to not intervene immediately. Ezio eventually found Mirella, who reacted by deploying a stun device to slow his approach before trying to escape through the streets. During the chase, she was intercepted by the apprentice, who restrained her long enough for Ezio to reach the scene. Ezio then killed her using a poison he carried, ending her efforts permanently. Oksana Razin was a Cossack from Odessa who later became a member of the Templar Order. She entered military service in response to concerns about Ottoman expansion in her region. After several years working as a scout and intelligence gatherer, including acting as a spy and surveillance agent, she was recruited by the Templars, who offered financial and political support in exchange for her allegiance. The Order considered her scouting and espionage expertise valuable, especially for operations targeting key areas of Ottoman influence. She accepted their offer and continued her work under Templar direction. Damat Ali Pasha was a former servant who initially served under Sultan Bayezid II. As Bayezid's long-term territorial ambitions declined, Ali found himself drawn to the Templars' political philosophy, believing their structure and influence could bring stronger centralised control to a region that he saw as unstable. He later joined the Templar Order, viewing it as means to promote authority and long-term order. In 1511, Ali became indirectly involved in events that also drew the attention of Ezio and one of his apprentices. A Templar tax collector whom Ezio's apprentice had earlier observed moving across rooftops robbed merchants of official financial documents in Constantinople. The two assassins pursued the collector, working at different levels, Ezio at street level and the apprentice from above. The apprentice eventually killed the collector and secured the stolen records, which were then returned to Ali. Ali expressed gratitude, questioned Ezio about the assassinating with him, but received no confirmation as the assassins avoided revealing personal or organisational ties. Later that same year, a bounty was issued against the same assassin apprentice who had recovered the documents. This resulted in an attack on them in the Grand Bazaar, which Ezio disrupted after being warned by a civilian observer. After defeating the attackers, Ezio and the apprentice exited the market complex, intending to expose additional Templar-aligned operatives involved. They were ambushed again in the Old Bedeston section of the bazaar by a separate group of armed Byzantine-aligned Templar supporters. Ezio then instructed the apprentice to conceal themselves, while Ali entered the bazaar shortly afterward with 2 guards, focused on commanding a public crackdown against the assassins. The hidden apprentice positioned themselves behind him and killed him without being detected. In his final statements, Ali asserted that the assassins repeatedly disrupted Templar objectives and that the Order's long-term influence would have strengthened regional stability if left unchallenged. Shakuli was born into a Turkmen tribe in eastern Anatolia, a region situated along the outer edges of the Ottoman Empire and often subjected to its control. During his youth, an Ottoman attack on his tribe left him orphaned, and so in search of both revenge and a new community, he was taken in by a group of Saravid sympathizers, and later became involved with the Templar Order. Over time, Shakuli developed a deep resentment toward the Ottoman Turks for the suffering they had caused his people, as well as toward anyone who opposed the Templar cause. This hostility eventually shaped his personal mission to remove anyone who stood in the way of the Order's objectives. Shakulu eventually rose to become a prominent and feared member of the Templar Order. He entered into a partnership with fellow Templar Manuel Palaiologos, an heir of the former Byzantine imperial line. Shakuli supported Manuel's plan to rebuild the remnants of the Byzantine Empire, motivated in part by the belief that he would be rewarded if Manuel succeeded. Despite this cooperation, their alliance was strained, as the Byzantines had historically been adversaries of Shakulu's people, much like the Ottomans. In mid-1511, Shakulu and Manuel travelled to Constantinople to meet with the Janissary captain Tariq Barletti. Their purpose was to gain access to the arsenal and examine a shipment of weapons that Tariq had agreed to supply to their forces. While reviewing the firearms, Shakuli reminded Manuel of the assistance he had provided in rebuilding the latter's army, emphasising that his contribution should not be overlooked. Manuel acknowledged this and assured Shakulu that he would not forget the obligation he owed him. In 1512, Shakulu withdrew to the Templar headquarters in Derinkuyu, Cappadocia, and during this time, several spies working for Tariq Barletti were captured. Because they were Ottoman Turks, Shakulu personally executed many of them, killing them brutally. Afterwards, he met with Manuel, who reprimanded him for his excessive cruelty towards the prisoners, but after ignoring the criticism, Shakulu ordered his men to bring the remaining captives to the chapel, where he intended to torture and execute them publicly. When one of the guards responded that he did not have the key to the chapel, Shakulu angrily commanded him to locate it. Unbeknownst to Shakulu, the assassin Ezio Auditore had been observing the meeting. Upon hearing the mention of the key, Ezio set out to obtain it from the Byzantine captain named Nicholas, who was on leave from his duties. Soon after, a crowd gathered at the chapel for the planned executions. Shakulu took his position in the open courtyard and began killing a spy named Janos by beating him. Guided there by Janos' fellow spy Delara, Ezio climbed onto a cross above the courtyard and attempted to assassinate Shakulu with his hidden blade. Believing the strike to be fatal, Ezio stated that Shakulu deserved no mercy for the pleasure he took in cruelty. However, Shakulu's armour absorbed the blow, allowing him to survive and seize Ezio by the throat. Ezio countered by stabbing him in the chest with his hook blade, but Shakulu still managed to throw him aside, leading to a direct confrontation between them. Although he was supported by several Byzantine soldiers, Shakulu was ultimately defeated and killed by Ezio in a duel. Honestly, Shakulu's ability to survive 2 initial hidden blade strikes and continue fighting is actually insane, and just illustrates the extent of his physical resilience. Anyway, Shakulu died sometime in March of 1512, with his age being unknown. Kuruk was a Pawnee warrior who was cast out of his homeland after his older brother rose to become the tribe's chieftain. He travelled east and eventually offered his skills as a fighter to either the Assassins or the Templars. Exactly which side he joined is unclear. Centuries later, the hacker collective Erudito reported that this detail had been lost to history. Regardless of his allegiance, Erudito noted that Kuruk was never more than a grunt and didn't have any major impact on the wider Assassin-Templar conflict. Kuruk was known for his immense strength and fiery temper, traits that made him a dangerous opponent. While he mainly worked as an enforcer, he was also a highly skilled weaponsmith and took pride in crafting arms in his spare time. John O'Brien was an Irish labourer who immigrated to America in search of a fresh start, having grown tired of the Templars' constant interference back home. Naturally quiet and preferring solitude, John genuinely wanted nothing more than to be left alone. However, years of persecution at the hands of the Templars gradually pushed him towards violence. While it's unclear whether John was related to the assassin Liam O'Brien, the two did share Irish roots, so it could be possible. Matthew Davenport was a British Army officer and Templar who fought during the American Revolutionary War. Cold and calculating by nature, he carried out his duties with ruthless efficiency and was fiercely loyal to the soldiers under his command. He was just as capable on the battlefield as he was at planning and strategy. Aware that his daughter, Eleanor Mallow, was also fighting against the assassins, Matthew undertook highly sensitive Templar missions on her behalf. Although he shared the Davenport surname with Achilles and Jonathan, no confirmed connection between them has ever been established. The Coyote Man was a notorious Templar, most likely of Lakota origin, widely considered the deadliest assassin hunter operating along the eastern coast of North America during the 18th century. His reputation was cemented when he reportedly killed an assassin mentor with his bare hands, an act that became legendary among both allies and enemies. In 2012, Abstergo Entertainment used his genetic memories as the basis for an Animus avatar. The character was named after his real-life alias, Coyote Man. As part of Abstergo's broader propaganda efforts, his Templar ties were deliberately erased from his public profile. Instead, he was portrayed as a man devoted to protecting his village rather than serving the Templars. His most infamous act was also rewritten, with the murder of an assassin mentor replaced by the far more palatable story of him killing a bear. Abstergo further blurred his true identity by presenting him simply as a master hunter, celebrated as the finest on the American East Coast. In reality, the Coyote Man was a true psychopath who revelled in bloodshed and avoided social interaction entirely. He was feared by his enemies and respected by his fellow Templars. In combat, he fought in a wild, frenzied manner, wielding twin shanks and overwhelming his targets with relentless, animalistic attacks. He stalked his prey with disturbing enthusiasm, often wearing war paint and bone masks that only increased his terrifying presence. These were more than intimidation tactics, they reflected his lethal skill as both a hunter and a warrior. His fighting style matched his feral nature, chaotic, unpredictable, and driven by extreme agility. He would dart in and out of his enemy's vision, striking before vanishing again. The hacking collective Erudito once joked that he had won the Deadliest Templar Guerrilla Award 5 times in a row. His ability was undeniable, so much so that Abstergo later hailed him as the greatest assassin hunter of his era on the American East Coast, despite the fact that it was Shay Cormac who ultimately wiped out the colonial assassins. As for the assassin mentor he supposedly killed with his bare hands, the details are unclear. The Coyote Man operated primarily along the eastern seaboard, which indicates that the victim may have belonged to the colonial brotherhood. However, this raises questions, as the only known colonial mentors of the 18th century were Achilles Davenport, who died of old age, and Connor Kenway. This means the mentor he killed could not have been part of the colonial brotherhood, leaving the victim's identity unresolved. Bernardo de Galvez y Madrid was a Spanish military commander and colonial administrator. He served first as the governor of Spanish Louisiana and later rose to become the viceroy of New Spain. During the American Revolutionary War, de Galvez supported the Continental Army and dealt several significant blows to the British forces, making him a high-profile target for the Templar Order. Later in life, he married Marie Félicité, the second daughter of Gilbert Antoine, who were both found in Assassin's Creed Liberation. Gerhard von Stanton was a Hessian soldier who fought in the British Army during the American Revolutionary War and was a loyal member of the Templar Order. He was infamous for his love of combat and, with little in the way of personality, functioned as a relentless killing machine who carried out orders without hesitation or fear of defeat. The hacking collective Erudito later speculated that von Stanton may have been the infamous Headless Horseman, an eerie figure encountered by Shay Cormac in Sleepy Hollow and later by Connor Kenway in The Frontier. However, this theory raises some issues. Since Gerhard served as a Templar under the British during the American Revolution, he could not have crossed paths with Shay Cormac during the 7 Years' War, when Shay was still active, unless such an encounter took place before Shay joined the Templars in 1756. Duncan McGill was a Scottish Highlander who was forced into exile and eventually made his way to the American colonies, with little more than the clothes he wore and a sword at his side. Though he had little interest in the broader conflict of the American Revolutionary War and held no great love for the British, McGill still chose to fight, driven by his deep loyalty to the assassin cause and his determination to thwart Templar ambitions in the New World. His actions soon gave rise to local folklore, earning him the fearsome nickname Red Rage Duncan. William de Saint-Prix was an assassin of the French Brotherhood, born into an aristocratic family. At just 17 years old, he was dispatched to aid the colonial Brotherhood during the American Revolutionary War, a mission that would cement his reputation as one of the Brotherhood's most respected figures. Raised in a noble French household, William enjoyed a life filled with opportunity. From an early age, he received a broad education in the liberal arts and sciences, disciplines readily available to someone of his status. Alongside this, he trained with the Persian Brotherhood, mastering combat, stealth, assassination, and free running as he grew into adulthood. On his 17th birthday, the Partisan Brotherhood sent William to the fledgling United States to support the colonial Brotherhood's efforts. Under the leadership of Achilles Davenport and Connor Kenway, the colonial assassins had aligned themselves with the Patriot cause, and William did everything he could to aid the revolution. Though many revolutionaries distrusted him because of his aristocratic background, his intelligence, resolve, and bravery earned him the respect of the fellow assassins as he fought against the Templars. William's contributions left a lasting mark on the Assassin Brotherhood, and he was remembered as an especially heroic figure in their history. His legacy was so well regarded that even the hacking collective Erudito openly expressed admiration for him. Al-Sumsay was a Shawnee woman renowned among her people as a fearless and passionate warrior. As a child, she stood apart for her preference for solitude, a trait that earned her the name Al-Sumsay, meaning independent. As she grew older, her quiet, reserved nature hardened into a fierce and aggressive temperament. An uncompromising idealist, she remained steadfast in her beliefs, even when doing so put her life at risk. This resolve led her to oppose the Templars as they expanded their influence into the European colonies surrounding her homeland. Al-Sumsay was a maverick among her peers, introverted yet never timid. In adulthood, her true nature emerged fully as a determined idealist. Where others might retreat from danger, she pressed on with unrestrained courage, driven by a willingness to die for what she believed in. To the Templars, this made her a dangerous radical. To her supporters, she was a heroic defender of justice, truth, and the preservation of her people and their culture. Gillian McCarthy was a Templar seductress who used charm and manipulation to climb into the highest levels of society, amassing power and wealth even at the cost of her own family. She grew up in the North American colonies alongside her younger brother, Fillion McCarthy. Born to colonial settlers in the New World, Gillian murdered her parents at a young age, an act that left both her and Fillion homeless and destitute. Forced onto the streets, the siblings adapted quickly, using wit and cunning to survive. Where Fillion turned to theft, Gillian instead learned to exploit seduction, aligning herself with men of influence and status to secure protection and advantage. Several of the figures that she ensnared were Templars, and through them she was eventually offered a place within the order, at the cost of betraying her brother. Seeing the offer as a path to power and social ascension, Gillian accepted, whether out of genuine belief in the Templar cause or sheer ambition. In doing so, she permanently severed ties with Fillion. From that point on, their paths diverged completely. Gillian rose through the ranks of the Templars, while Fillion would eventually find his place among the assassins. Victor Walcott was a doctor of British descent and was notorious for his disturbing experiments. Obsessed with the pursuit of knowledge and power, especially in biology, medicine, and the occult, he developed a reputation for pushing ethical boundaries. Rumours claimed that his elixirs were capable of pulling wounded Templars back from the brink of death. Beyond this, Walcott was known to refine his dissection skills on fresh bodies, though exactly how he acquired them was never made clear. His methods, much like his work, remained shrouded in mystery and unease. Joe was widely believed to be a mentally unstable mercenary who murdered civilians on the streets of New York during the American Revolution. In reality, he was an exceptional member of the Assassin Brotherhood, driven by a strict sense of justice and targeting those who preyed on and abused women. Joe operated exclusively at night, a habit that helped fuel his terrifying reputation among the public. His growing infamy meant that his name was spoken only in whispers, and his true identity was never known. The nickname Joe itself reportedly came from one of his Templar victims, who screamed the name moments before being killed. Emily Burke, better known as Calamity Millie, was a frontier pioneer during the American Revolutionary War. The only daughter in a family of 10, she grew up tough, developing a rough demeanour and learning the value of hard work and sacrifice from a young age. As she grew older, Emily struggled with the restrictions placed on her because of her gender. That struggle ended suddenly when her father and brother were killed by members of the Templar Order. Abandoning any attempt to conform, she set out to uncover the truth and take revenge, hunting down and killing the Templars she believed responsible. Though she never formally joined the Assassin Brotherhood, she became a trusted ally of the Order throughout the 18th century. Father Federico Perez was a preacher of Spanish descent and devoted member of the Templar Order. He was driven by an obsessive need to purge the land of assassins, whom he condemned as sinners and heretics. His absolute unquestioning faith in the Templar cause made him both ruthless and efficient. Perez dispensed death as readily as he offered forgiveness, never hesitating when it came to condemning and executing those he believed had strayed from his vision of righteousness. This blind devotion was highly valued by the Templars, who admired and fully exploited the control they held over him. Eleanor Mallow was the daughter of Commander Matthew Davenport, a British military officer, and she enlisted in the British Army during the American Revolutionary War. Often dismissed as a spoiled brat, Eleanor was raised under the strict militaristic discipline imposed by her Templar father. Her loyalty to the Templar Order was absolute, and she carried out covert missions against the assassins while attempting to conceal her true identity, though Matthew was secretly aware of her activities. Young, strong, and highly malleable, she embodied the personality the Templars valued most. Eleanor's surname differed from her father's, suggesting it was either an alias used to protect her identity or a name inherited from her mother. Fillion McCarthy was a thief who, like his older sister Gillian, learned to survive on the streets from a young age. Where Gillian turned to manipulation and seduction, Fillion relied on theft to get by. As Gillian climbed the social ladder and ultimately allied herself with the Templars, Fillion cut ties with her entirely. In time, he crossed paths with the Assassin Brotherhood and found a place among them. Resourceful and capable of looking after himself, Fillion's loyalties were simple, securing his next meal and helping the Brotherhood whenever he could. Caleb Garrett was a skilled gunslinger who joined both the American Revolutionary War and the Assassin Brotherhood after witnessing a group of Templars burn his friends alive. That experience drove him to take up arms and commit himself fully to the fight. Drawing on his military-level expertise with rifles and other small arms, Caleb patrolled woodland routes and defended his allies with lethal efficiency. Atasata, also known as Chogun or Kryn, was of Kanyan Kahaka descent and was raised away from his people by his assassin father. From a young age, he was trained in the art of killing, using those skills primarily as a means of survival. He lived a quiet, hidden life until his father was slain by a Templar raiding party. After that, he wandered through cities under Templar control, constantly searching for an opportunity to take revenge. Nikilik was a chieftain of an Inuit tribe who journeyed countless miles south after learning of his southern kin's struggles. Determined to aid the revolutionaries and protect his people, he brought his strength to the fight. Despite his size, he was remarkably fast and agile, making him a highly valuable ally. Alejandro Ortega de Marquez was a Spanish privateer and member of the Templar Order who operated throughout the Caribbean. During his career, he seized several small islands in the name of King Philip V of Spain. There were also rumours that at one point he spent about a year living among the Taino people, possibly even marrying a Taino woman and fathering children with her. Despite that, Alejandro later led an attack on a Taino settlement and was killed during the battle that followed in 1707. Because of his work at sea, Alejandro was rarely at home, and some of his children, like Lucia Marquez, grew up without ever meeting him. As a result, the family often struggled financially, forcing them to fend for themselves on the streets. Researchers at Abstergo Entertainment have also speculated that Alejandro may have been the father of Apia Apito. If that theory is correct, it would mean that Lucia and Apia were actually half-sisters. Parry Crowther was the kind of pirate who truly lived up to the old-fashioned image of a buccaneer. He leaned into the gentlemanly side of the term, carrying himself with a charm that helped disguise the more serious side of his work. With such a laid personality, Parry could easily shift between roles, using his charisma to cover his true dealings. Even though he had an intimidating presence and a strong taste for drink, he was known to be warm and easygoing when he was among friends. Adrian Flood was an Irishman who spent part of his childhood in an orphanage in Cork, where he had been left as a baby. When he was 8 years old, he managed to escape and hid aboard a ship heading for the West Indies. Not long into the journey, the vessel was attacked by the pirates of Kumi Burko. After the raid, Adrian was taken in by the crew and eventually earned his place among them. He first worked as a deckhand and later as a spy, using his small size and agility to slip into tight spaces and gather useful information. As he grew older, however, a rougher side of his personality started to show. Adrian became increasingly sarcastic and disrespectful, and he developed a cruel streak. Because of this, he was eventually put to work as both a disciplinarian and a torturer within the crew. By the time he was 18, Alphonse had taken a job aboard a merchant brigantine and travelled to the West Indies. After the death of his patron, he inherited the business and went on to establish the de Morigo plantation in Martinique. As his fortunes grew, Alphonse began to distance himself from his modest beginnings. He started claiming French heritage and even adopted the noble title of Comte to reinforce his image. Later on, he crossed paths with a young, talkative stowaway named Charlie Oliver. Taking a liking to the boy, Alphonse gifted him a tricorn hat. Unsure what else to do with him, he eventually introduced Charlie to the Templar Order. Renato Aguilar was a Templar born in Spain and into an influential branch of the Bourbon dynasty. Trained in the art of la verdadera destreza, he developed into a highly skilled swordsman and a keen student of strategy. Renato believed the discipline was the highest form of education and saw it as one of the Templars' greatest tools in their struggle against the assassins. Driven by this belief, he travelled to the Spanish colonies across Central and South America with the goal of spreading his technique and teachings. His commitment to this mission was so intense that it eventually strained and ended his relationship with Felicia Marino, something Renato would later come to regret. Dominique Jean was the niece of a voodoo houngan and grew up in Saint Dominique under his caring guidance. Raised in that environment, she developed into a sharp and imaginative thinker. Dominique often enjoyed working with others and was known for her ability to collaborate, but anyone who crossed her quickly learned just how dangerous she could be. When she was 16, she met Kumi Burko, and the two shared a short-lived relationship. However, it didn't last long, as Kumi eventually left the island, bringing their time together to an end. Kawali was an Aztec warrior from Mexico who chose to take to the sea, leaving his homeland behind to fight against the Spanish conquest spreading throughout Central America. Although he often struggled with homesickness and came to realise that life aboard a ship didn't suit him, his determination to continue the fight never wavered. Along the way, Kawali encountered several assassins and killed them, as he strongly rejected their vision for the world. Even after his own community was destroyed, he managed to survive. In time, he joined a growing group of native Templars who were working toward restoring peace and order in the region. Lucia Marquez was born in Spain in 1689 and was the daughter of the privateer Alejandro Ortega de Marquez. Because of his constant absence and his eventual death, Lucia was left to fend for herself at a young age. By the time she was 12, she was living on the streets, supporting both herself and her sisters by begging, borrowing, and stealing whatever she could. During those years, she became close friends with Felicia Marino, and the two often teamed up to pull off the more profitable heists. When Lucia was 17, she tried to steal a horse from a high-ranking Templar, but was caught in the act. Rather than face prison, she chose to accept training within the order. Lucia and Felicia were both eventually brought into the Templars, though their friendship began to fade not long afterward. Over time, Lucia proved herself through a series of trials and adventures, eventually becoming a respected member of the order, and being entrusted with one of the 5 unique Templar keys. In July of 1715, Grandmaster Torres received a map from Edward Kenway that revealed the locations of several assassin bureaus across the West Indies. Lucia, along with a small group of elite Templars, were tasked with tracking down the leaders of these hideouts and eliminating them. She travelled to Grand Cayman, where she stayed in the home of her trusted associate Vargas, and began searching for her target, Apia Apito, by sending ships out to scout the surrounding waters. Eventually, however, Lucia herself was tracked down by Apia and Edward, who wanted the Templar key that she carried. After hearing that the pair had arrived in Grand Cayman, Lucia fled to Pinos Isle. Her plan was to spark a conflict between Apia and the island's inhabitants, who had formed an uneasy truce with her years earlier. After learning about Pinos Isle from Vargas, Apia and Edward pursued her there. As night fell, Lucia hid among the island's ruins, but once her men had been taken out by the pirate and the assassin, she was forced to reveal herself. She fired at Apia in an attempt to keep her at bay, but the move left her vulnerable, allowing Edward to strike the fatal blow. With her final breaths, Lucia lamented what she saw as the wasted potential of the islands, claiming that the Taino lacked the knowledge to make use of their resources and would miss out on wealth and freedom. Apia angrily rejected this idea, insisting that her people had always lived freely without such ambitions. Kumi Burko was the son of a chief from the Ashanti Empire and spent his early years surrounded by wealth and influence. That life changed dramatically after a territorial dispute led to his capture. He was sold into slavery and transported to Jamaica, where he remained until the Maroon warrior Cudjoe freed him from during a raid on a plantation. After gaining his freedom, Kumi joined the Maroons. Eventually, Kumi gathered his own crew and secured a ship, setting out on a career as a pirate. He and his crew attacked ships throughout the Caribbean, building both a reputation and a fortune. Among those sailing with him were Charlie Oliver, a young stowaway known for constantly sneaking pieces of Kumi's loot, and Adrian, an orphan who had hidden away on one of the vessels Kumi's crew had captured. Being much older, Kumi often teased Adrian, especially about his trousers, and much to the boy's annoyance, gave him the surname Flood. During his travels, Kumi also spent time in Saint Dominique, where he met Dominique Jean, a lively young woman who was the niece of a voodoo houngan. The two shared a brief relationship, but it ended when Kumi eventually left the island and continued his journeys at sea. Hilary Flint was born in 1682 as the third son of an aristocratic family. From an early age, he stood out as the black sheep of the household. Rather than fitting into the expectations placed on him, Hilary preferred to spend his time alone, studying mathematics and science. Before long, he developed a fascination with explosives, an interest that earned him a reputation as the family's problem child. Hoping to steer him into a more respectable direction, his parents sent him to a military school during his teenage years. There, Hilary's easygoing nature helped him fit in quickly. He joined several clubs and became involved in a few secret societies. After graduating, the connections he made eventually led him to the Templar Order, where his unusual expertise with explosives made him a very useful member. In July of 1715, Grandmaster Torres received the map from Edward Kenway that revealed the locations of several assassin encampments across the West Indies. Hilary was tasked with tracking down the leaders of these hideouts and eliminating them. His assignment brought him to Havana, where he set up operations with a squadron of soldiers and soon found himself locked in a bitter rivalry with the local assassin bureau leader, Rona Dinsmore. During one attack on Rona's bureau in 1717, Edward Kenway unexpectedly arrived and helped to drive off Hilary's forces. After the fighting ended, Edward admitted that he had unknowingly put Rona in danger by selling Torres a map that revealed her location, and that Hilary carried a Templar key Edward wanted. Realising their interests aligned, Edward and Rona decided to work together to disrupt Hilary's operations and ultimately take him down. Their investigation revealed that Hilary had been stockpiling gunpowder throughout the city as part of an escalating arms race against the assassins. Edward destroyed these hidden reserves to weaken his position, and once the advantage shifted, he and Rona moved in to eliminate him. Rona confronted Hilary directly, engaging him in combat while taunting him to keep his attention. As the fight continued, Edward slipped behind him and delivered the killing blow. With his final words, Hilary expressed regret that he and Rona had never had the chance to fight on the same side. Jing was born in 1686 to Chinese rebels and grew up developing a sharp mind for negotiation, along with a natural talent for languages. As her ambitions grew, she eventually turned away from her family's cause and married the son of a general in the Qing dynasty, someone her father strongly opposed. Through this marriage, Jing was introduced to the Templar Order and became part of it. She later worked as a diplomatic advisor, but shifting political conditions in China eventually forced her to abandon her position and flee the country. Over the next decade, Jing travelled the world as a pirate, gaining a reputation for ruthless brutality in battle. Even while living the life of a pirate, she remained committed to the Templar cause, forming alliances wherever she could to advance the Order's influence. Her loyalty eventually earned her the responsibility of guarding one of the 5 unique Templar keys. In July of 1715, Jing and several other elite Templars were assigned the mission of tracking down the leaders of assassin encampments in the West Indies and eliminating them. However, she became distracted after learning that her 2 targets, brothers Upton and Vance Travers, possessed a map rumoured to lead to a hidden treasure. Jing approached the brothers through their smuggling operation and began manipulating Vance, seducing him and convincing him that she was in love with him. With her eyes set firmly on the treasure, she persuaded him to kill his brother, Upton, and claim his half of the map. But when Vance hesitated and failed to carry out the plan quickly, Jing began to lose patience. During one of their meetings in Nassau, she confronted him about what was taking so long. Vance assured her that the problem was already being handled, claiming he had hired someone to kill Upton at that very moment. However, the attempt failed when Edward Kenway intervened after learning about Jing's scheme from Upton himself. Afterward, Jing and Vance arranged to meet again in the swamp outside Nassau. When Edward tracked them down, he killed Vance for betraying his brother. Realising what was happening, Jing tried to flee, declaring she would not share the same fate, but Edward caught up to her and assassinated her as well. With her final breaths, Jing revealed that she had already taken both halves of the treasure map for herself. The piece Edward had recovered from Vance's body was only a forgery. When Edward demanded to know where the real map was, Jing told him it was already in her husband's possession, before finally dying. Edmund developed a fascination with poisons at a very young age. He studied them obsessively and experimented whenever he could, testing their effects on everything from local animals to unsuspecting classmates. As he grew older, he refined his knowledge and eventually adopted the more respectable image of a physician. His skill and relentless dedication eventually caught the attention of the Templar Order, who recruited him into their ranks. Over time, however, Edmund grew tired of the rules and expectations that came along with being a Templar. He preferred to operate by his own standards, which often revealed a strong streak of hypocrisy. In 1784, Edmund captured Patience Gibbs and imprisoned her in Fort Washington. He was determined to obtain a charm that had once belonged to her mother, believing it allowed her to stay one step ahead of her enemies. Around the same time, Aveline de Grandpré managed to free Patience. Patience tried to escape on her own, but Edmund recaptured her and forced her to hand over the charm before leaving his men to deal with her as they pleased. Afterward, Edmund headed through the tunnels leading to Newport Tower. There he attempted to activate the charm by reciting a hymn that had belonged to Patience's mother. The attempt failed, however, because Patience had only given him half of the charm. Not long after, Aveline and Patience tracked him down and confronted him, ultimately assassinating him. With his dying breath, Edmund bitterly reflected that he had wasted his life chasing what he called a dirty piece of savagery. Felicia Marino was born into a family of thieves, and from a young age she was taught the tricks of the trade. As she grew older, she became highly skilled in disguise and sleight of hand, talents that made her especially effective at slipping in and out of places unnoticed. While her early crimes were fairly small, typical childhood pickpocketing and petty theft, Felicia eventually moved on to bigger jobs, robbing stagecoaches and stealing jewellery from nobles and even princesses. She developed a close friendship with Lucia Marquez, another young thief, and the two often teamed up to pull off larger and more daring heists. When Lucia was eventually recruited into the Templar Order, Felicia followed her into the organisation as well. Unfortunately, their once tight bond began to fade not long afterward, something Felicia would come to regret. Later on, Felicia became romantically involved with the Spanish Templar Reynaldo Aguilar. However, the relationship struggled to survive Reynaldo's intense devotion to spreading his preferred style of swordsmanship, and so it eventually came to an end. Ferreira de Ortega was the daughter of the Spanish Templar Alejandro Estrada de Ortega. Unlike her brothers, who were trained from a young age to follow in their father's footsteps within the order, Ferreira and her sisters were excluded and expected to live quiet domestic lives instead. When she was 17, her parents arranged a marriage for her with a man they had chosen. Unwilling to accept that future, Ferreira ran away from home and cut all ties with her family. From that point on, she set out to live what she called a life of adventure. She spent her time exploring and looting treasure from Maya ruins, clashing with pirates along the way, and eventually becoming a fierce pirate herself. Dacre Danu was a member of the Saint Dominique Brotherhood of Assassins, who was sold into slavery at the age of 14, and during that time he kept to his beliefs and his desire to build a better future for his people. After escaping, he came into contact with the Assassin Brotherhood and was trained by them. However, he eventually chose to leave the group in order to pursue his own path. Wanting to deepen his understanding of Haitian voodoo, he dedicated himself to its practices, believing it was key to fulfilling his greater purpose of helping shape a new world. Over time, Dacre Danu became a Hungan, rising from a junior priest to a high priest. At some point along the way, he also joined a Maroon community, taking part in plantation raids as part of their resistance. Sylvia Seabrook was the daughter of a goods trader, but from a young age, she longed for a life of adventure at sea. After her brothers were lost in the New World, she made a bold decision to disguise herself as one of them, taking on the alias Sly. She began working aboard various ships. Over time, Sylvia proved herself to be a highly capable navigator, and her skills didn't go unnoticed. The Templars eventually took an interest in her abilities and recruited her into their ranks. Charlie Oliver, who liked to call himself Charlie the Great, ran away from home when he was just 10 years old. He managed to sneak aboard a ship by hiding in a barrel of apples, which eventually took him all the way to America. There he crossed paths with Alphonse, who took a liking to him and even gifted him a tricorn hat. Still unsure what to do with the boy, Alphonse eventually introduced Charlie to the Templar Order. At some point later in his life, Charlie also spent time sailing with the pirate Kumi Burko. During his time with the crew, he became known for helping himself to their loot, often stealing from both the plunder and the men themselves. Manuel Mendoza was a mysterious figure who spent much of his life travelling the world. Over the years, he took on a variety of identities and jobs, including a stint as a pirate, before eventually settling into a quieter life as a coffee farmer. Even then though, he never stayed in one place for too long. Manuel had a habit of disappearing for extended periods, seemingly to serve some unknown cause, adding to the mystery surrounding him. Edward Thatch, who would later become known as Blackbeard, was likely born in Bristol, England around 1680. Very little is known about his early life, but he appears in historical accounts during the War of the Spanish Succession, beginning in 1701. During this conflict, Thatch served as a privateer for the Royal Navy in the Caribbean, attacking enemy ships with government approval. During his time at sea, he became acquainted with several notable figures, including Benjamin Hornigold, Edward Kenway, and Charles Vane, who would all play important roles in the pirate world. In January of 1713, Thatch and his crew came to the aid of the Amazon Galley, a ship belonging to the East India Company that was under attack by pirates from a vessel called the Emperor. The attackers were quickly defeated by Thatch's privateers, leaving only two pirates alive, Blaney and Edward Kenway. Blaney wanted to kill Kenway, but Thatch instead ordered the two to settle the matter in a fistfight. Kenway won the fight, and when Blaney tried to cheat, Thatch shot him and recruited Kenway into his crew. Later that same year, the Peace of Utrecht ended the war, and many privateers like Thatch suddenly found themselves unemployed. With no legal means of earning a living at sea, Thatch and most of his crew turned to piracy. Thatch eventually reunited with Benjamin Hornigold and developed a strong friendship with him. Hornigold convinced Thatch to serve as his quartermaster, a position he held until early 1716. In 1715, Thatch, Hornigold, James Kidd, and Edward Kenway met in Nassau to discuss plans to drive out the British garrison and transform the town into a pirate republic. As part of this plan, Thatch and Kenway captured a Spanish galleon called El Arca de Maestro and deliberately beached it near Abaco Island to act as a defensive barrier for Nassau's harbour. By 1717, Thatch had grown his beard and cultivated the intimidating persona of Blackbeard. Around this time, he took control of a ship called the Adventure, originally captained by Stede Bonnet, whom Thatch kept aboard as a protege. Soon after, Thatch captured the French slave ship Le Concorde, which he renamed Queen Anne's Revenge, in honour of the late Queen. He outfitted the powerful frigate with over 40 cannons, quickly gaining a reputation as one of the most feared pirates in the West Indies. Throughout the following years, Blackbeard encountered and assisted other pirates, including Samuel Bellamy and his allies Oliver Levasseur and Alonzo Batilla. During a battle with a British warship called the King George, he later investigated the wreckage of Bellamy's fleet after a storm, and learned more about the mysterious Templars who were attempting to control the seas. In 1718, Blackbeard and his allies in Nassau faced shortages of vital supplies, especially medicine. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Thatch attacked a British warship carrying medical supplies and later blockaded the port of Charlestown for a week, taking hostages until the town surrendered the medicine he demanded. Eventually, Thatch accepted a royal pardon from Charles Eden, the governor of North Carolina, hoping to retire from piracy. However, he soon returned to raiding ships in order to secure more wealth for his retirement. His continued piracy drew the attention of Alexander Spotswood, the governor of Virginia, who hired Lieutenant Robert Maynard to hunt him down. In late 1718, Maynard launched a surprise attack on Blackbeard's forces at Ocracoke. The ambush destroyed several ships and forced Thatch and Edward Kenway to escape aboard the Jackdaw. Realising they could not flee safely, the pirates boarded the attacking warship in a desperate attempt to seize it. Despite their efforts, they were overwhelmed by the larger British force. During the brutal fight, Kenway tried to help Thatch by throwing him a pistol, but Blackbeard was ultimately killed in the battle and then beheaded by the British. So now with the final character done, I finally completed the first series on the channel and every multiplayer character has been explained. Again, I want to express my thanks to all my channel members for their extra support to the channel. It is greatly appreciated and helps out more than you know. I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.